Daniel, will you open us up in a word of prayer, please?
Lord, I thank you for bringing us all here this morning, and I pray that you would help us to remain awake and focused on your word this morning, Lord. Help us to get what you would have us to have out of it, Lord, to grow our lives in you. Pray that you keep us safe today. Our pastor, pray that you bless him, be with him. Just comfort him to take care of him in this difficult time, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. So, we're in the book of Proverbs. So, I'm going to have you turn to James. For anybody who tried to get ahead. I like to zig when you expect me to zag. Anyway, welcome to Lighthouse Baptist Church on this cold but sunny Sunday. It's a light turnout. Obviously, we know where Pastor is. And we're praying for him and Miss Pasca. But for anybody else who's not here, need to keep them in prayer as well. I'm going to read, let's see. What am I going to read? I thought it was James 1:1. Where's the verse on masters? Well, the one that says, teaching is, teachers are held more accountable. Apologize. I really thought I knew where this verse was. I'm very embarrassed. I really thought it says rabbis, I think, or maybe it says masters. Well, all right, well, I guess this is what happens when you go off script. All right, we'll just move on. Anyway, the whole point is anybody who teaches anything or of spiritual nature, 3:1. Well, I got the one right. My brethren, be not many masters, knowing that ye shall receive the greater condemnation. So masters is teachers. Masters and teachers receive the greater condemnation. So that means if you're going to teach or preach, that's a serious thing. And obviously anybody who's done that knows that. But that being said, whenever you get up here, we take it seriously and we want to make sure that we acquit ourselves properly. And so myself, being a chicken, I never sought out anything. I never sought this stuff like to be a teacher or a leader, because for two reasons. One, I never considered myself good enough. And then two, I knew because my dad had taught me that teachers were, judged more harshly. It's not, somebody who sits here has the level of judgment when you go before the judgment seat of Christ, but the teacher has the greater judgment. So I was thinking about this recently, and I asked my wife, I said, when I started teaching? She didn't recall. Well, I do. It was after Pastor McComb died. So Pastor McComb was gone. We didn't have Brother Mike. Bill was here, and Tony was here, but they didn't want to. They didn't want to teach, and so I have some ability, and I have some training, and Brother Kelly had booked a 3-week trip to Israel. Well in advance before Pastor McComb passed away. So Pastor McComb died, and we didn't have anybody to stand up here and fill the pulpit. So it fell to me, which was, keeping in mind, James 3:1 was, something that concerned me. And I recorded the stuff that I did and gave them to Kelly. I don't know that he ever listened to them. I don't know that he felt that, but he's like, he trusted me. But this is a serious thing. And the reason I bring this up is, I'm not different than anybody else other than maybe I have the ability to teach and other people don't. But I'm not any more spiritual. God uses us where we're at. And when he, picks you, that's when you got to step up and do it. Moses, Noah, there's countless examples in the Bible of people not really being like, yay, I want to do this. This is for me. God uses imperfect people. And if you're ever critical of yourself and you say, well, I'm not very spiritual, or I'm not very this, or I'm not very that, well, that's true of all of us. I think it's easy, it seems like we always go one way or the other. We either are too hard on ourselves and so we don't ever try stuff, we don't ever do things, or we think higher of ourselves and so then we step out and kind of make a fool out of ourselves or have pride or something like that. So I just was thinking about that and I thought I would share it with you on this day. When Brother Mike has to fill in and pastor's out, and it was a challenging couple days for me. It's been challenging at work, although work has improved. I've had a couple pretty decent weeks. I'm not ready to get my hopes up yet, but if I could count on an equilibrium that I could adjust to instead of things bouncing all over the place, that would be nice. But I do appreciate your prayers. So I kind of wanted to share that with you because I remember what my daughter Liberty said to me once about not wanting. She didn't think she was saved because she didn't really like going to church. Well, when you're talking about the stuff, we've got lots of doctrine and things like that here, and she's kind of an antisocial grump like me. So it's pretty natural for her not to like going to church. And church, I'm not saying church is a chore, but to do anything is basically a chore for me, especially if I have to leave my house. My dad was like this social person and friendly and life of the party. My mom told me this just recently. And they got married, and then my dad never wanted to do anything or go anywhere. And that's because that's who he was naturally, But he taught Sunday school and he did things like that. So it's different people are different, right? So that's kind of why I'm mentioning that, because I wouldn't make a good pastor because I'm not extroverted. That doesn't mean all pastors are extroverts, but there's other flaws in my character that I think would not make me a good pastor. One, I don't want to hear about your problems. Okay? When people tell me their problems, I feel like they're my problems now. I can't just, listen and be sympathetic, which is what your wife usually wants. Or I can't seem to be able to hear your problems and offer a clinically detached, suggestion. I feel like they're my problems now. I'm not, that's just how I am. And so if you want to complain about something, find somebody else to complain to, please. But, that doesn't mean if you have problems, I won't listen. I will. And I'm not saying that about everything. I'm just saying, unfortunately, that is my temperament. So God uses us where he sees fit, and our obligation is just to respond. And so that's why I am here today. So to recap what we had talked about, last week I kind of blew through chapter 7, and it's because a lot of this stuff has been stated before, but this was a little different because it's kind of an actual story of something that was observed by Solomon. And it's basically a woman seducing a young man because he's not very bright. He's ignorant. He's gullible. He's naive. He's void of understanding. And I like what Kelly said once about what did Joseph, it was Joseph, right? Joseph do when he was not really seduced, he was accosted by the woman, Potiphar's wife. He fled. He didn't resist. He fled. And we're supposed to flee temptation. And that's probably, although I've only got one young man in here, the other young man is home with a stomach problem, which he got from me, which I got from my mom. So flee when you encounter temptation. Don't resist. That's probably the most important lesson that any of us can apply. And obviously some things are more dangerous and stuff, but like I know Kelly doesn't worry about the woman's feelings. And Joseph didn't either. And sometimes there's consequences. In this day and age, it's dangerous. But that is the safe way to get ourselves out of temptation. We have to trust that God will protect us. Although it might have seemed to Joseph that he wasn't protected by God, he might have felt a little hurt and he was left alone, forgotten in the dungeon, quite literally in some respects. God will get us where he wants us in the end, and we have to have this long view of life, of not just focus on these circumstances. Although, especially when pastors going through health trials and stuff, it's like, hey, he just wants to serve God. Why doesn't God cut him some slack? Well, maybe God wants other people in the church to grow spiritually, and this is a way to force them. Maybe God is trying to teach pastors something. I learn things from what pastor's going through that I don't want to have happen to me. I mean, really. Kidney disease is like, we get this mindset of like, oh, we can just throw pills at this stuff, and modern medicine will fix this stuff. You can get a transplant for all these things. And it's like, yeah, it's surgery, but you'll be coming out good as new. No. I actually have a friend, I mentioned it before, who had a kidney transplant. And you've got to go, you're so susceptible to illness. You have to take immune system suppressant medications. So then you're really, really likely to get sick. In fact, there's actually something, I don't remember if it's a bacteria, but there's something in pretty much all of our bodies that our immune system just, every time it raises its head, it's this virus or whatever, every time this virus raises its head, our immune system just plays whack-a-mole with it. It just goes bang, bang. And so it never causes the same problem. But when you take these meds, these drugs, so that your kidney won't be rejected by your body, because your body's like saying, that's not my kidney, get out. I don't care whose kidney you are, but you're not mine, go away. When that happens, you'll get sick from this other thing. And so that's bad. First you gotta get the kidney transplant, that's tough, unless you're Steve Jobs or somebody, and money does help get transplants. In fact, I actually remember when the guy who was on JR from Dallas, no, it didn't. It bought him some time maybe, did not keep him from dying. His illness destroyed, I don't remember the organ, but it destroyed it. He got a transplant, probably bought him a few months, maybe a year. and then he died later. And he was going to die, so he just spent a bunch of money and extended his life. The guy, JR from Dallas, I just remember seeing the commercials and stuff. I never got to watch that when I was a kid, but he drank until he killed his liver and then used his money to get himself another liver. And how does that work? I'm not entirely sure, but I do know that you can go and register for organs on all sorts of different, every state has their own. And so if you do that, your likelihood of getting a transplant goes up a lot. But your costs go up a lot because you're going to be paying that out of pocket, right? You can't, your insurance isn't covering that. So, you know, being rich has its privileges. Of course, people were concerned because, hey, he destroyed it through drinking. It doesn't seem fair, but life's not fair. So this whole seduction, and I looked up the word seduce, and seduce is a really good word, actually. And it fits fantastically because it basically means to get you to do something you shouldn't be doing, to do something inappropriate, to disobey. So you can get seduced by your friends at school. It doesn't have to be a sexual thing, although we tend to put it in that realm. A man getting seduced by a woman, or a man seducing a woman. It does not have to be that way, but seduction, you're enticing somebody to do what God says not to do. And we see at the very end of chapter 7 that the way is death. Sometimes literal death, sometimes the death of your testimony, death of relationships, it's death. Death is just not good. We don't need to quibble. We don't need to say, hey, not everybody dies, although that's my tendency is to nitpick stuff. At least it was when I was younger, although now after having children that want to nitpick and say, you didn't say that, you said this. You know what I meant. So chapter 8. So kind of dividing this up is a little bit tricky because it's really all related to wisdom. So I'm just going to pick some arbitrary breaks, and these are just where I don't want to read anymore, I guess. 8:1, doth not wisdom cry, and understanding put forth her voice? She standeth in the top of high places, by the way in the places of the paths. She crieth at the gates, at the entry of the city, at the coming in at the doors. Unto you, O men, I call, and my voice is to the sons of man. O ye simple, understand wisdom. And ye fools, be ye of an understanding heart. Hear, for I will speak of excellent things, and of the opening of my lips shall be right things. So let's just stop there. One of the things I want to point out is wisdom is not found in man. Now, if you go to godly men, you can get good advice that is wise, but it is basically, and this is kind of it is rephrasing of what the Bible says already. Okay? We're not giving you anything that's not already in the Bible that we haven't already been told. Now, we can give you some biblical advice applied to a worldly situation and do some interpretation for you that might be helpful. If you say, should I join the Marines or not? Well, we can lay out some of the pros and cons. And really, there are pros to joining the Marines, such as the GI Bill. I don't see a lot of spiritual pros to joining the Marines. Okay? But God uses men in the Marines too. Somebody's got to help fight and die for this country. This country is important, even in this day and age. We still send out a lot of missionaries, support a lot of missionaries, print a lot of Bibles. Although we seem to be falling pretty fast, there is still some good influence that we provide on the world. So that's what man can do, is just interpret the Bible and advice. But notice here, wisdom isn't something that's hiding, although you can go and seek it out. As we've read, you can dig for it like you can gold, but it's also, it wants to be found. So it's kind of like, there's a lot of parallels here between getting saved and wisdom. It's kind of interesting. I hadn't really noticed that before, but wisdom calls and is trying to get you to seek it. God wants everybody to be saved, and God will draw people. But you have to respond. You have to respond to get wisdom. You have to respond to get saved. Wow, the flesh is so powerful. It's so strong. It's so, so, and I think it's been weird with my kids. I think they think, especially after what Liberty said, that once that I have it figured out, and I don't. My flesh is as strong and so frustrating that I can't do better. I can't seem to do better. But I'm not blaming God for that. I'm blaming myself because I'm too lazy. I don't care enough, I guess. So there's always things to distract you in life. There's always, temptations to seduce you. There's video games to play. There's books to read. There's television to watch. Although hopefully you're not watching it the old-fashioned way with commercials. Hopefully you're streaming it so you can filter out some of that other nonsense and pick your content a little better. There's all sorts of things that tempt us away from God. And it's challenging because those things are not necessarily bad, but it's really easy for them to turn. Video games are one of the worst, I think. I've gone months, sometimes years without playing video games because they can be so addicting. And I'm not I don't have the addictive personality. I don't get addicted to everything. But you're just this is fun, this is challenging me, this is you want to go do it. And my kids are, I see that all the time. China even had passed laws against, the number of hours kids could play video games in a day. I don't know if that's active right now or not. I don't know. I don't keep up on their daily civil restrictions, but I had read that because they recognize that video games can be dangerous. Am I here preaching against the evils of video games? No, I'm just saying there's all these things that will pull us away and seduce us from doing what we should be doing. And as Kelly has been so good at saying, everything I tell you here are things that I struggle with. There's 2 points with wisdom's call. Number 1, it wants you to understand and have an understanding heart. And then it wants you to hear. And sometimes when I look at the order of things, it makes more sense to flip it around. But in this case, it's important before you hear to be able to have your heart prepared. I heard this from the time I went to Bob Jones, but I didn't give it a lot of thought. It's prepare your heart. Bob Jones was hard for me because I went from a pretty loosey-goosey Baptist-like church that used the NIV to Bob Jones, which is very hardcore, even though some of their doctrine is off and it's probably gotten a lot worse. But so it was a really weird contrast, and so I didn't take a lot of the things I'd heard very seriously because I didn't understand them. But especially when I talk about teaching or preaching, if you're going to come to church, spend a few minutes praying about it. Doesn't have to be much. But, are you filling a pew, or are you just here to check a box, which is better than nothing? I'm not judging you, because I've done that plenty of times. Or do you want to get something out of it? Are you here because you want God to speak to you? Do you want to leave church? You want to leave this building today having learned and grown? And I think that's really all, we all want that. We just don't think about it enough to actually pray for something. To pray that church will go good, the services will go good and everything. But it is a thing, God cares about this, but we have to care too. And the biggest way that I found to care about things is by praying about them. So Brother Mike and I were negotiating over who was doing what this morning. And he asked for prayer, and he said he'd pray for me. And that's great. We need prayer. We need to pray for each other. And in all the ministries, there's song services, Sunday school over there. It all needs prayer. We have to have our heart prepared. And then, once our heart is prepared, you have to hear, right? What's the point of hearing if your heart's not prepared? Because it's going to be like water on a rock, basically. It's not going to absorb anything. But if you don't ever hear anything either, that's kind of pointless. But hearing is obvious. Understanding and preparing your heart to understand is not so obvious. Verse 6, hear, for I will speak of excellent things, and the opening of my lips shall be right things. Later on, there's something where it talks about the froward mouth. So I'm just going to kind of bring these two things together. Our speech should be proper. This, once again, if you've been raised in a Christian home, this is pretty obvious. But I did have one of my children say, what do you mean? Why can't I tell dirty jokes? I'm like, seriously? Why can't you tell dirty jokes? Have I been that bad of a father? Like, is this? So I showed him. Just as I was reviewing this yesterday, or as I was preparing for this yesterday, that it says, that in verse 13, the fear of the Lord is to hate evil, pride, and arrogancy, and the evil way, and the froward mouth do I hate. Okay, so the froward mouth covers a lot of stuff. It covers dirty jokes, covers cursing, or they use another term for it. So I say swearing, but having a foul mouth and saying things that don't edify God, and not only that, damage or destroy your own testimony. I developed a habit of swearing when I was a child. It's been with me ever since, and it's a struggle. And Jimmy mentioned his brother, who last week or so was saved. That's still a struggle because he's developed a habit. However, we do know that God can. He doesn't always do it. Sometimes we got to get ourselves to a spiritual place, but God can take those things away from us. But I've tried to emphasize to my children not to repeat my mistake. And unfortunately, public schools, I don't know, rebelliousness, they manage to control their speech around me, but that's about it. That's frustrating because when you develop those habits, they're very difficult to break.
You can become a stumbling block for others.
Absolutely. I mean, that's whether it's cursing or dirty jokes, you become a stumbling block for other Christians, or you damage your testimony for unsaved. It's bad stuff, and we shouldn't treat it lightly. I tell my children whenever I've tried to make it known when I curse, it's wrong. I have to ask God to, I confess those sins. I've already been forgiven, but I have to say it's wrong and effectively do the washing of the feet thing, cleanse myself from that unrighteousness. You know, it sounds all spiritual and stuff when I say it, but I am genuinely sorry. I try really hard not to do it, but not hard enough, because I'm lazy. And I don't care enough, and I don't understand how sin hurts God. And I need to internalize those things. And if I do that, it will help me. Verses, let's read on from 7. For my mouth shall speak truth, and the wickedness is an abomination to my lips. All the words of my mouth are in righteousness, and there is nothing froward or perverse in them. They are all plain to him that understandeth, and right to them that find knowledge. So obvious, but I'm teaching Proverbs, so I'll go over it again. Why do we listen to wisdom? Because wisdom doesn't steer us wrong. Wisdom, by its very nature, is wise. And a wise man doesn't give you bad advice. Pickett's charge was not a wise thing. Not sure why I did a callback to Civil War. I guess I was listening to it. But anybody who knows anything with like Pickett's charge in Civil War, or knows anything about the Civil War, not trying to impugn you if you do not know this history, was basically the Confederate charged lines, and they had open ground, and it destroyed the unit, and it was an unwise thing. It was an unwise decision made by somebody who had been categorized as generally a wise man, which was Robert E. Lee. Okay, but a wise man doesn't do foolish things. Wisdom doesn't lead you astray. And this wisdom is pure, it's truth, it leads you on the path of righteousness. And we probably won't get there today, because it's almost quitting time. But there's some really interesting parallels between wisdom and Christ. So much so that J. Vernon McGee actually said that wisdom is Christ, which I thought was interesting. But they're plain to him that understandeth, and right to them that find knowledge. And you have to have the knowledge, and then you need to understand it. And then once you understand it, you can apply it. And it's a lot like justice, judgment, and equity. Justice is knowing the difference between right and wrong. Judgment is making the decision, and then the equity is the actual implementation of that decision. Receive my instruction and not silver, and knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is better than rubies, and all the things that may be desired are not to be compared to it. We'll stop right there. So, better than gold, silver, rubies, what else is better than rubies? What? Diamonds. No. What else? All right, sorry, wrong. Not a good question. What else is compared to be better than rubies or above rubies in the Bible? Huh? No, but what's that book you have at home that says above rubies? What's that talking about? I thought this would be obvious to the women in here. It's like A Good Wife. What? Yeah, sorry. Far above rubies. Wait, like wisdom's above rubies? Good Wife's far above rubies. So we should listen to our wives in all things because they're smart. Although we should listen to our wives. It just doesn't mean, when you listen, that doesn't mean we do what our wives say in all things. But we should listen to them. I do value my wife's input. I really do. My fingers crossed. So, wisdom's better than rubies. There's no comparison. So next week, we'll talk about some of these things, and it's really interesting, I believe, when you talk about, when it talks about the genesis of wisdom and wisdom's history. It basically goes back and talks about the creation of the earth and all that. So we will stop there since we're out of time, and I'll pray and dismiss us.